Hello.
Hello.
How you doing?
I suddenly seem to have lost the audio from you here. I don't know.
Hello.
Here.
Is it back?
What?
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Is it back?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great.
I can hear you
Well,
now.
I will just learn not to click last minute buttons.
No problem.
Great.
It dropped out partway through the lovely theme music, and I was like, I don't know if this is me or what. Where does that music come from, Jeremy? I'm super curious.
Our good friend Owen Eddy, who used to live in town and moved to Hawaii because of his army job, wrote that for us. For production of
That's
Pericles,
nice.
actually. We
It's
share
nice
a
to own
production
your
of
own music.
Pericles in our history.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Very
you and
nice.
I were in a production of Pericles once together.
Well, strictly speaking, I was not in that production. I came out at the beginning of it in what was, I guess, a pre-show announcement capacity,
Yes.
uh, and sort of acted like a jackass for 5 minutes at the top of the show, and then sometimes stayed and then sometimes left. That was kind of my on that one, but that was a good production.
Yeah, I had fun. I still remember the song you made up. Pericles,
Yeah,
Pericles, may I have a program, please?
I am proud of that to the extent that it was made up in the moment. Like, as I was coming down the stairs, uh, it was very silly. Pericles, Pericles, I love Pericles, 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 it's my favorite show. That was how I started out my little bit. And as I was coming down, there was a person handing out programs. Pericles, Pericles, may I have a program, please? Pericles, Pericles, it's my favorite show. So, yeah, that lives on. It's funny because people do. I mean, the handful of people who we know who remember that does get brought up periodically. It's one of the like of our time in grad school. One of the things that people throw back at me more often than anything else. So I don't know what to make of that exactly. If that's like the pinnacle of the work that I did during that time, but it appears to maybe be.
Well, this is a surprise to everyone. We didn't tell anybody we were doing this. We're just here. It's so hello. You've been surprised.
Secret show.
It's a secret show. I'm now back from vacation, many weeks of vacation,
Yeah.
and so although like no one has seen our faces for many weeks, although we're still on the podcast. Like we had lots of, we're weekly on the podcast. So you know, this will appear on a podcast in a few weeks after we're all caught up, I guess.
Very nice.
So we're talking about stuff today. We're talking about Trump's Axios interview and Perry Mason, and then we've got a scene to read. We've never read a scene.
Yeah, we're thinking we may add this in as a feature that we periodically do here on the podcast slash broadcast, the show, as it were. Some original piece of short material, a scene of some sort, maybe a short play in and of itself. But we'll periodically do a little bit of theater, and well, of a sort that we'll periodically kick into the feed here. So that'll be fun. But yes, as you say, we want to start with the Axios interview of Donald Trump. If we don't know what we're talking about, for HBO's TV series Axios, which is the television, I guess, broadcast, cable broadcast show that goes along with the Axios website, political website. That was an interview of Donald Trump at the White House by Jonathan Swan, who is a regular reporter for Axios at the White House. What are your thoughts about that? Right out the gate there, Jeremy.
So I loved it perversely. I loved it. It has reminded me most of the old school Jon Stewart Daily Show interviews, in terms of its sort of staging and in terms of the getting a ridiculous response and ridiculous words out of someone's mouth. But of course, the Jon Stewart stuff was sort of edited to do some of that, right? And to sort of purposefully make uninformed people look stupid, or stupid people look stupider. This was this kind of worked in the opposite direction, right? It was just revealing as opposed to I think working at an angle in the way that the Daily Show stuff did.
Yeah, I think that's true. Part of what's interesting about it to me, there are a lot of interesting things about it, and this has been spoken about quite a bit. No doubt people listening to this or watching have seen the interview and heard a lot of the commentary about it. And if they haven't seen the whole thing, clips are around online, or you can find the entire interview online. It's worth taking a look at. It does feel different from other interviews that Trump has done. Recently, and farther back into the past, he seems to be, this coming on the heels of an interview that he did with Chris Wallace at Fox recently, does feel like he's trying to engage with confrontational media, which, credit to him, I guess, given breaking his MO over the past 4 years of shunning difficult media, he's clearly diving into that, I think, to try and create a contrast with Joe Biden, who, according to their narrative, is ducking all press and all difficult interviews. So he can say, look, I did these interviews, and I'm sure that this, if he hasn't already said it, which he probably has, he will be soon, says, I'm going out having these interviews that people are saying are incredibly difficult and incredibly hard, and I'm going in for them, and what's Joe Biden doing? So that's the purpose of doing this. And it may redound to his benefit ultimately. It seems to me that these sorts of interviews do sort of confirm the priors of whoever's going into it. Though this one is interesting because the response does seem to have had people who support him even concede that it was a bad look for him. I'm curious about, really diving into what it is that made this so much worse for him than other interviews. I don't think that this is going to have a necessarily lasting effect, but I think it will be cumulative. And has a number of moments that will be remembered. So what is it that made this damaging? I contend that stagecraft has something to do with it. But
yeah, tell us what you mean about that.
Well, okay, a couple of things. This was an unusual interview in that the way that it was filmed, and part of this is because it was for HBO, was using different sorts of cameras, had a more filmic look to it, in part because Axios presents itself as an elevated news magazine that is on HBO, and so the visual style of it is higher than the kind of grainy, washed out, or flat look that you see on cable TV often, which also tends to be framed in very close up. Two shots. You got one camera framed in close on the president from the shoulder up, and then one framed in close on the interviewer from the chest up. And this was different in that they had a lot of coverage on it, at least 3 cameras, and they were, and the quality of the film was higher. It was a higher, it was a better definition, and it felt like you were watching a scene from something, a film or a TV show in some way, which is subtly shifts the dynamic, I feel like, a little bit. And also, you just got a lot more of the body language of both of the people involved, which helped to tell the story better. Now, part of what was interesting about that, too, is that they were very animated. Trump is usually very animated, so that's not really a surprise. But Swan, as the journalist giving the interview, was unusually demonstrative, I feel like, in many ways. And so on that level, I think the technical stagecraft level, I think that affected my perception of it. And when I also talk about stagecraft, the other point that I mean is that the interplay between the two of them, it felt very much like a scene, I think, to me. Scene in a film or a TV show. Again, part of that is because of the way that it was filmed, but also there were unusual things about the way that Swan approached that interview, where it felt like a conversation and felt like you were watching an interplay between two different characters almost. And I think that had the effect of bringing down the president's guard in certain respects, though I think he is basically who he is, but it was also affecting to see someone responding to him in a way that felt naturalistic and human in a way that interviews with him rarely do seem. And there was something sort of cathartic and emotionally charging about that. We can get into some of the details of that, but that's kind of what I'm talking about when I talk about stagecraft, I guess.
Yeah, it's really interesting because where my brain goes with hearing you say that is, of course, when you stage or screen something in that way, the thing that's going to follow is a sort of a revelation of character, because that's what we're trained to look at when we look at those things. When you frame it or when you stage it in this way, our brains are sort of encoded now, watching 40 plus years or whatever happens to be of this thing. We're making associations about character that are different than you're right, the sort of one-dimensional 24-hour cable news way of handling that most of the time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the president is a demonstrative person in his body language, in his language. And news in our country, the style of it has for many years been to try and frame people up in a way that feels digestible and that flattens things out a little bit. There's a professionalism to the interviewer that we all sort of expect a little bit when we see somebody interviewing the president. A deference, which Swan had, but there were other elements that move away from the norm. Deference is one of those things, but also a sort of polished, unflappable demeanor. There's a real emphasis placed on sort of a smoothness and continuity for the interview that I think often has the effect of normalizing odd behavior, especially with the president. When you put that frame on it, that cable news frame on the president, with an interviewer who maintains a sort of unflappable presentation, you get the impression this is normal, or everything that's happening right now is part of the understood, acceptable, whatever. And this broke that. The style of the thing broke that for that reason, and also Swan's physical responses, which were, it was interesting because you look on, I first saw this interview in clips and images. The memes that have come from this online are still proliferating, and Swan's facial expressions are pretty funny. His responses, his reactions to things, puzzlement, of amusement occasionally, of bewilderment. You take them in freeze frame. It gave me the impression that the interview was going to be somewhat hostile. Just taking a look at those and a couple of the clips that were circulating, and it was interesting watching the entire interview. In context, Swan does an interesting thing because he doesn't feel really hostile. He feels like he does seem like he's being respectful. And what's interesting is you get the sense of a relationship that the two of them share. The president knows him, and he knows the president. And he's digging into this discussion with the air of somebody who, is maintaining a professional relationship and a deference and a respectfulness, but who also has the sort of intimacy of someone who carries over a relationship that exists outside of the frame. And you can see that on both sides. And what's interesting in part with that too is that the president clearly on some level likes this guy. I took that away. I seem to think.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think there's one of the takeaways I have from watching the interview is that, and I could not tell if it was a game that was being played, or if it was skill, or if it was sort of a genuine approach. But I saw Swan echoing back Trump to Trump. Specifically in terms of what you're talking about with like these other people might call them microaggressive responses, right? And sure. I'm not sure, but I think you're right. They're not entirely aggressive. They're more that they can be read as like, I'm trying to understand you. I really am trying to understand you. Yeah. Help me out here. And at times I saw, particularly in the stuff that has gotten sort of clipped out and shown, it does look like two people who are sort of doing this nonverbal parring, and that's what it's about. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah, well, right. I do feel like Swan, there is a sophisticated thing that he's doing there. When you talk about mirroring the president to himself, there is a self-consciously theatrical element to him, I think. Like the deference that he shows to the president, and part of what makes him effective here is that part of what's interesting is that he responds in granular form to everything that the president says and does. Mm-hmm. Takes him on his own terms and responds in good faith to the president. One of the things that I think is a problem with people who interview him frequently is that because of what I was talking about, that sanitizing impulse on the part of interviewers, and particularly in cable news, when the president says something that's really crazy or demonstrably false or kind of stupid, a lot of times people just sort of delete it. The interviewer just passes over it, in part because I think that they don't know how to respond in a way that isn't immediately rude. It's like to say, that's stupid, or no, you're wrong, or in a way that's fairly aggressive. What Swan manages to do, and I do think it's an act, is he engages in the conversation as if it was and let me finish what I was saying before. And so the people who are usually interviewing the president or talking to him in a interview type session, rather than immediately come out with something that will shut down the conversation, which is, no, you're wrong, or that's stupid, or whatever, because that'll elicit a bad response from him, they'll just usually not pursue it. Do you know what I mean? Or they will pursue it in that way, and then President Trump gets testy and shuts it down, and that's the end of it. What Swan did that was interesting is he maintained a sort of good faith response to the president, where he said, "Well, now wait a minute. Is this what you're saying? I don't understand. Could you tell me what books are you talking about? What manuals are you talking about?" When the president said that one should read the manuals to find out about why someone shouldn't test as much, he said, "What manuals are you talking about?" As opposed to, which is to say, he pretended to be a little bit more sort of naive than he actually is in some respects. It's like, and yet at the same time, it's a perfectly honest answer. I mean, there is something weirdly disarming about the president when he says something like that: read the manuals, read the books, and somebody says something that breaks your brain a little bit. It's like, well, I don't know how to respond to that crazy thing that he just said, so I'm going to pretend he didn't say it, which as often as not is how people respond to that. Swan sort of in this very sincere, and now I'm showing you that I'm puzzled sort of way, says, "What manuals are you talking about?" He does a little bit of the thing that Tucker Carlson actually does on Fox a lot, which is Tucker Carlson adopts this sort of puzzled face as, when he hears something, it's like, what are you saying right now? I don't understand. I'm knitting my brow and I'm showing you how much I'm confused by the thing that you're saying. Tucker Carlson is never confused. He, that's an act. That's a presentational act. And Swan has managed to master that to some degree as well. This sort of presentational, conveying of confusion, but also in a way that seems sincere when, strictly speaking, it isn't really. He really, it's a show. And I think that part of what makes it effective with Trump to some degree is that, President Trump has good showbiz instincts, if nothing else. Do you know what I mean? And sort of lives his presidency as if it was a TV show, or behaves as if it was, in public, as if he was performing. And to find somebody who meets him at that place suddenly makes the thing pop in a way that it frequently doesn't. I think that what Swan did is he played on Trump's field in a way that reporters frequently don't feel comfortable doing, I think. The sort of maintaining the strictly sort of confrontational sort of tenor to the discussion under normal circumstances is part of what slips them up a little bit. They keep trying to drag Trump into the world of reality a little bit, and the president just maintains this performative sort of thing. And Swan went and met him there and was very effective because of that, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right.
One other aspect of it that, before we let this go, that I think was interesting is, like I said before, he clearly kind of liked Swan and he wanted him to like him. And I am curious, kudos to him. Like, it's a long game that he must be playing to get him to be there with him in that way, because there is this degree to which the president, I think, the president wants people's approval often, until the moment that it turns sour and then he gets ugly with him. And to have been able to maintain the president on that hook of being like, I'm trying to convince you, that's a rare skill. And it's an interesting thing that I think.
To circle back just briefly, I mean, I do think you're right that this interview is part of a strategy. I'm interested to see between now and the convention, and then after the convention, sort of
convention,
what the convention, the no press invited secret backroom convention. Although the Democrats in this case are not doing much differently.
Yeah.
The I'm interested to see sort of what the approach is, because right now I think the thinking across, regardless of who's the rational thinking, regardless of whose perspective, is that things really, really need to break his way for this election to work out. I do think the gap that's there will close, but I don't think it's set up right now to close as far as he needs it to, and there is that requires a change, right? I mean, even if your main job, as his is sort of marketing and public relations, that requires a change, and I see the interview as part of an admission of that. Like, we're going to have to use the overused word pivot a bit to buy some of the center of the country back.
Right. Well, he's got to go out of his comfort zone.
Yeah.
Right. And if he doesn't, then, it is an admission in that way. There's a version of this election where things didn't go terribly, where the virus didn't happen, where I don't think he's engaging with confrontational media at all.
Right.
But this is the moment that we live in, so we'll see what happens.
Okay, we did that.
Let's talk about Perry Mason, shall we?
Perry Mason.
So, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a HBO series, Perry Mason, based on, well, the old Perry Mason. Well, it's a reboot, kind of. There was a Perry Mason television show starring Raymond Burr that aired for many years, and then had a series of TV movies that went on for decades, in which Perry Mason was a defense lawyer who was always working to get his clients acquitted of whatever it was that they were accused of. And so those were also based on a series of novels, pulp novels, of which there were many. And this TV show is nominally, they say that they're a readaptation of those novels, but there are some subtle nods to the television show throughout. So it's sort of a reboot of the TV show and a readaptation of the novels at the same time. What do you think about that show, Jeremy? What is your, well, first of all, do you have any sort of prior relationship with Perry Mason?
Like the tiniest bit. I do remember seeing some of the TV movies pop up, and seeing the TV show in syndication when I was younger. I followed Matlock much more closely. It was contemporary with my childhood, whereas Perry Mason wasn't quite. But I do remember the character, the actor, and that's about it. You know, it's like a case of the week kind of thing.
Yes.
So I do have like the tiniest touchstone to that. I love the show. I mean, I caught up on it, which is rare for me. It's for a show to hold my interest.
Right. No, I understand what that is. Yeah.
But it does. It's sort of far from perfect for me, but I do find the story interesting. I think the cast is crackerjack.
We should mention that Perry Mason, the character who was played by Raymond Burr in the original series, is played by Matthew Rhys, most recently of the Mr. Rogers movie with Tom Hanks, and before that, The Americans, she was the star of, where he played a Russian spy pretending to be an American citizen. And this is his return to television in a big way with Perry Mason. And in addition to that, you have John Lithgow as his mentor figure, Tatiana Maslany from Orphan Black, for which she won an Emmy, playing a sort of hybrid character, I think, based on a couple of different people. Amy Semple McPherson is probably the character that the person that she's the most similar to from history, who was a radio broadcasting religious figure. I don't know exactly what you'd call her. She's sort of a preacher, occupied a strange position in the church that she was in, and Tatiana Maslany is playing a character related to her. And then has some other great characters, like a lot of just really great character actors who are going to flex their muscles in this. And it's a noir series, which is interesting. For anybody who watched the original Perry Mason, the first 4 or 5 episodes of the show, I think, could be really confounding in some ways, because it's not, strictly speaking, Perry Mason that you remember. Perry Mason in the novels and in the TV series was a lawyer, and every episode was sort of framed around his audacious defenses of his clients, and really was the show that created the cliche for television of the person breaking down on the stand and revealing, under the hard questioning, sort of giving everything up and turning the whole case around, because Mason, through his expert grilling of them, gets them to say the thing that they shouldn't say, and acquits his people like that. And the show begins with Perry Mason as a private detective, and a real sort of scuzzy one in Los Angeles, sort of drawing on, the LA noir sort of tropes of Chinatown and Who Framed Roger Rabbit to some degree, and which is a parody of Chinatown, but still holds up as its own noirish thing. Or LA Confidential, it's sort of in that line, and in that period. And he doesn't become a lawyer. Spoiler, I guess we're going to talk some spoilers here, until like 5 episodes into the show. And that's really, I feel like, the key to the series in a lot of ways. It's like, oh, this is what they're doing. That's when it coalesced for me. The way that he becomes a lawyer on the show is, frankly, underhanded and dishonest, which is interesting, right? He's defending this big murder case that is sure to lose, or he's the investigator for his mentor lawyer, who's played by John Lithgow. And then, again, spoilers, folks, skip past this if you don't want to hear it. Lithgow kills himself because the case is so unwinnable. And then, through a series of machinations that are not strictly honest, he ends up becoming a lawyer. He doesn't exactly cheat. Well, he kind of cheats. I guess he cheats.
Well, he passes the test, but he cheats.
Yeah, he cheats because he's given the answers, which he memorizes.
Yeah.
Before he takes the test to get on the bar, and he forges a document that says that he's been acting, as an apprentice to his, mentor lawyer character for many years, which could stand in lieu of law school. And so suddenly he's, very quickly made a lawyer. And I think that sort of speaks to the fundamental mission of the show, which is a very HBO thing to do in one way, in one sense, and also sort of popular in our culture in general with these sorts of reboots, which is, Perry Mason in the original series was this upstanding figure. One got the impression sort of unimpeachable, and this is very much not that guy. And in keeping with that sort of tradition on television recently, where they sort of peel back the illusion, the facade to show you the seamy underbelly underneath it, that's what's happening here. It's like Deadwood. you know, deconstructing the cowboy mythos and undermining it, or the Western mythos, and this is what they're doing with Perry Mason. But the thing you want to do when you're trying to do that is you want to deconstruct it and then build back up to the thing so that you are embodying the thing itself again. That seems to have been, like, in the second half of the series, what they're really doing. Like, because the idea is like, well, if what would it take to make this character who could audaciously get his people off, in court with a speech, or with his, with the pyrotechnics of his lawyerly abilities and whatnot. And what does it take to be that kind of a genius in a way that we could buy him and believe him now? And that seems to be the project of the show, is like, let's show you what this guy would have to be in order to be that guy in the real world. And it's a little bit like what they've done with James Bond, actually, in the Daniel Craig things, which is, let's start out sort of undermining him. If you take a look at Casino Royale, that's really their project there. He doesn't really make quips, and the fights are brutal and ugly, and he's kind of, pug-nosed isn't quite right, but, it doesn't look like James. He's not as sleek as James Bond at the beginning of that. And then only in the last moment of that movie, literally the last 30 seconds, does he step out and look like James Bond in the suit. And the trajectory of that entire series has been starting from there until you get to the later movies, where they are essentially just him embodying the original Bond, with, Ralph Fiennes playing M the same way that M was M in the, Connery and whatnot movies. And, he has his whole team around him, and it's got this slightly modern flair, but it's the same thing. And that's what they're doing with Mason here. They're pulling in the elements of the original show, putting a somewhat modern, subversive twist on them in some ways. Bringing in questions of sexuality, for instance, with longstanding characters like, that are around him that are from the show, who are shown to be gay in this series, which is interesting. The way that spins here, and it all sort of, it's like you're trying to create this complicating architecture, this origin story, that at the end of the series, I think we could leave it here, and then you could start watching the original Perry Mason series and see all of this running underneath it. Mm-hmm. Is the idea. It's like we've created these interesting backstories with which you could apply to the old Perry Mason series, only now with this deeper understanding of it being more complex than you thought it was. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, I think it's fun, and the thing I think when I watch it is that it's a couple things. I mean, it does have the feel of a marriage between the old case of the week and the sort of newer, long form, storytelling over the course of a season, where it's the case of the season, and we assume that next season will be a different case, kind of thing. And it does but it does successfully, I think, sort of week to week. Even though it's not a case of the week, it is a problem of the week, and it is sort of its own chapter. I think they call them chapters, actually, or packages. It does feel like that. It feels very narrative. It feels like a play. At times more than a TV show or movie, even though it has all the noir visual elements, of course, up to and including the sort of way they've colorized the world. Although they back off of that in later episodes, but it does feel like it feels the way the Perry Mason show and the Matlock shows felt like a play more than they felt like a modern TV show.
Well, particularly when they move into the courtroom, that's definitely true.
Yeah, and the characters are played, in part because of what they're trying to do, in part because of the setting, the all of the characters are characters. It's Perry Mason is pushed forward as a with a sort of character actor approach. Whereas I think it would have, I think originally it's more of a, I mean, Raymond Burr is not exactly your leading man type, but it is more like that in the original TV show than it is what we would associate with character acting. And that's what you're seeing from everybody in this show, top to bottom, is a character push.
Yeah, no, that is true. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned about Burr. He is an odd figure in some ways. He's not traditionally handsome, or wasn't when he was younger, but he's magnetic. You know, and definitely seems very polished and in control. I mean, he is. But I think that the inspiration is maybe rooted a little bit in him, to the extent that he does bring with him a sort of darkness that's unusual for a leading man. Like, you know, his cast of, you know, he was an interesting figure for a series of the time, because, again, he implies darkness while embodying something in the show, like on the surface, that seems very wholesome is not exactly the right word, but respectful. I mean, he seems very canny, and you know, Burr as a performer did have a certain darkness to him, which was accentuated as he moved through his career and got older. You could see that, you know, he was an imposing figure, and it's like they said, well, let's pick that guy apart and see what's inside that guy. And you know, your observation that they're taking what would be a single episode in the show and spreading it out to season length, I think that's right. And in the process, what they're doing is stretching everybody out and letting you look inside of them.
Yeah.
And that works out interestingly.
Yeah,
And, you know,
and I mean, just some other things that rattle through my head. I mean, where I think the show is imperfect, it still works. Like I personally think that this may be controversial, sorry, but I think that Tatiana Maslany's character is a stretch here for her, and she is someone who has demonstrated like absolute adeptness at being able to hop character to character. That was what Orphan Black was entirely about. But this is like not. You have to look at this character stretched out, as you say, and like in this character that she plays is larger than life. Is just weird, and like you can see the actor working hard at that. Whereas I think in Orphan Black, it for her it was more about the I have, I don't know, a dozen really great tools in my bag, and I know exactly how to use them, and that's what you're getting in this show. This is like a little bit of a stretch there, and I enjoy watching it. I just think it's a part of it's that, part of it's like the character isn't that character. We have yet to see sort of what the payoff is.
well,
And
yeah,
it's coming.
I
It's
think
coming.
I think that's the key. They didn't really. She, again, is based on this character, or on this actual historical figure, Amy Semple McPherson, who was a broadcaster, religious broadcaster, who ran a ministry that was broadcast nationwide and got a lot of money from people because of it. That was who funded the ministry, and it was centered in this church. And she was a charismatic figure, and this show takes very specific, like there's been something going on with this character, in quotes, from the beginning. She's sort of a magnetic presence on the radio and to the parishioners of the church that she's at the head of.
But demons behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Possibly literally. And I mean the good writing here, right, is that her character and the Mason character are basically following the same arc, maybe in
Yeah,
reverse directions, right? That they
right.
are presenting something in public that while they're haunted in private,
Yeah.
and you see them maybe headed in opposite directions.
Well,
Um,
it's hard. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. What my guess here, given the way that this show usually works in the original series, is that this is building to a big moment where she takes the stand
mm,
at some point, and is because over the course of the series, the church that she is at the head of, but it's a more complicated sort of structured situation, is slowly being implicated in a murder of that's at the center of this first season. And what I think this show has been about is trying to get her into a position where you could see her betraying
mhm.
the church. And she's been on this spiritual journey where she's, I think, been questioning the extent to which she is actually in touch with God. How much does she actually believe that? And they've kind of tread water for a while with her character in some ways, but really gave the game away, or really, not in a bad way, but finally pulled the pin on that in this last episode, where it gave you some specific answers that are like, well, this is why she's how she is, and start to answer that, and I think set things up for what I am, with my predictive powers here, saying is probably where this is going. We'll see if that proves to be true in the last episode, which is about to air on Sunday. But it's a good show. People should check it out.
And it's renewed for season 2 whenever season
It
2
is.
is back. So
It is renewed, and it's funny because it was initially brought out as a limited series, as a mini series, which I think is the game that all of these networks and streaming platforms and whatnot are playing now. It's like, here's a limited series, unless you like it, and then we'll turn it into a series. So you get into season 2, another case. Check it out. And those of you who are starting to check it, it's available on HBO or HBO Max, and this is a good time to get into it because the last episode is about to air, so you're not going to have to wait for a million years. And by the time people are listening to this, it will have aired. So go find it. Or no, whatever.
hooray!
So
We're trying
for
something
that-
new. We're trying something new, totally new.
we are trying something totally new. We figured, given that there's a theatrical element, obviously, to everything we're doing here, it'd be fun to do a little bit of theater here of some sort, or, flex those muscles a little bit and do something sort of creative. So we're going to be doing a new scene, a new piece of writing that we'll throw up here and read through for folks and maybe talk about, maybe not. And this will be the first of those, and we'll see where it goes in the future. We'll do other stuff too. Any thoughts before we jump into this, Jim?
No, I'm excited.
All right. So the thing that we're going to be reading here is a single scene called The Hangman's Tale. I will be saying the role of the hangman, and Jeremy's going to be Whizzer.
Whizzer. I'm waiting for
So-
the jokes to crack in the comments. We'll see.
So let's begin with this. Blood, 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 blood. Oh, how it does my heart good. Seeing the claret run, run, run. That's how you know that you're having fun.
Will you please?
Oh, 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 look at it go. Oh, 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 look at it flow. Down through the gutters, thick as mud, nothing as lovely as blood, blood, blood. Ah, Wizard, me lad, it's going to be a fine day.
If you say so.
I do. That I do. Smell the air, boy. Do you know what that is?
The bog.
No, lad. It's the smell of opportunity carried on the back of the wind.
I just smell the bog.
Damn you, wizard, I'm making a metaphor. You see, lad, times are changing for the better. Business is picking up.
I suppose so.
Suppose. What's the matter with you, boy?
I don't know.
Well, there's something wrong. Your sullen ways are starting to bring me into a black mood, they are.
I'm tired of all this.
What do you mean, lad?
I'm tired of the blood and the muck, the tears of the women and the screams of the men, and I hate the bog.
You used to love the bog.
Well, I don't anymore. I think it's ugly and smelly, and I'm tired of looking at it every day.
All right. Quiet down. Tell me, my boy, how long have you been feeling this way?
I don't know.
Might I hazard a guess? Might this have something to do with your sweet Polly leaving town?
No.
Awfully emphatic there, aren't you, boy?
Leave me alone.
Oh, lad, never in all creation was there a more acute source of misery made than woman to a man.
Shut up. You don't know what you're talking about.
And I know your sweetheart up and left last week on the day your daddy swung, so why don't you tell me what I don't know?
I hate this job. I hate it. And I hate you.
I see. You have to help put the old rope around the deck of your lady's da, and all of a sudden the world's a dark and terrible place.
Yes.
Right? Boy, did I ever tell you about how my father died?
No.
He was loyalist to the Duke. Did you know that?
No. No.
Well, neither did I until one morning the guards kicked down our door in the middle of supper and dragged me down to the clink.
Did he? Was he?
Hanged? Oh, yes, my boy. I stood there and I watched as he was.
I don't know what to say. How did you feel?
Well, angry and sad, but a little bit happy, too.
Happy?
Oh, yes, boy. For that was the moment that I knew I had found my life's true purpose. The great light filled me, and a voice called out deep inside and said that this was to be my destiny. More than my hurt, more than my anger, there was a great joy at seeing the one thing in this world that I found beautiful. You may be sorry about your Polly. You may miss her and hate the tears she shed on account of the work ye did. But I see in your eyes, boy, when the trap pulls out and the legs begin their dance. It's in ye, and the sooner you can see that in the eye, the happier you'll be.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But you do, though. Your fingers take to the rope a bit too eager, and you're working at the noose around the necks, too meticulous-like to simply call the doing of a careful and fastidious doer of a job well done. You likes it.
You're wrong. I don't like it.
Now, you listen to me, lad, because what I'm doing is saving your life. The world has little use for one such as ye and I, and of those uses damn few that'll let you walk down the street and sleep in your bed at night with the free and easy air of a man living his life out in the open. I sees the secret thrill ye feel when you watch the life slip out of a body knowing it's ye who let that life out of him. This is the place where you can feed that hunger inside you. Feed it. Free and clear. You should walk away. The time won't be too far distant when you should look to feed it in some other place. And then again. And again. And soon enough, you'll find yourself standing in this place once more, but it'll be me putting the rope around your neck. And on that day, I'll be sad to do it. But I'll be happy, too, when the trap falls out and I watch your legs begin their dance. And I know ye know what I mean. That's the end of that. So.
Hooray. We did it.
Hooray. We did it.
We should invite folks to give us some feedback. Let us know what they thought about that one.
Yeah, and if it's something you want to see done again, we'll continue to throw stuff up there, and as we move through this, Jeremy and I may talk about writing some other stuff too.
For sure. We have written some things together. This one reminds me of makes me think of Dexter and his dad.
A little bit.
Yeah. I love it.
Well.
I mean, the content is hard to love, but the approach is delightful.
It says something about you there, Jeremy. I love it too. So we can both be weirdos together. It's all right.
All right.
Anyway.
That's it for today. We did it.
We did it. Good job.
All right. There are more to come. We'll see you all soon. Thanks for joining us on the After Hours. We'll catch you again down the road.
See you next time.